Thank you for coming this evening. My name is Kara Elbert. I'm a member of the city's Historic Preservation Commission and wanted to welcome you and thank you for attending this lecture as part of Historic Preservation Month, which takes place each May. This lecture is also part of the 150th celebration of Spencer that we're celebrating this year. This lecture tonight is called The Development of Spencer and is being presented by Kirby, Schmidt, and Jim Thiesse. So thank you to them for presenting tonight. I also want to thank the Spencer Chamber, the Historic Preservation Commission, Spencer Municipal Utilities, the City of Spencer, the State of Iowa Library, and the Clay County Heritage Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. We'd like to start off this presentation again by acknowledging a bunch of informational sources and people involved with this, and a heartfelt thank you to those people. Now, Kara already mentioned some, so here we go. I'm not going to try to duplicate. The 1971 Spencer Centennial Book, the 1984 Clay County History Book, the Spencer Reporter and News Herald, the U.S. Census Bureau, the National Park Service, the Iowa Department of Transportation, the Iowa State Library, and the Iowa State Historical Society. And in particular, I'd like to thank James Worm with the Clay County GIS Department, the Clay County Recorder's Office. Kara mentioned the City of Spencer, but I'd like to mention Mark White, Craig Paulson, Dave Schaefer, and Mark Craig with the Public Works Department, Anna Harmon and Robin Larson with the Planning Department, Teresa Reardon and Mary Beth Breidinger with the City Clerk's Department. You've mentioned the utilities. I think we got, and especially Braden Feline and Deb Feldman with the Clay County Heritage Center, Bob Bates, Gail Brandt, and my wife Sandy, who is running the PowerPoint and created all the PowerPoints both on the first one I did and this one. So thank you very much. And if we have inadvertently mentioned or failed to mention or omitted someone or organization, we sincerely apologize for the oversight. We'd also like to add that we want to make this interactive with the participants in the room here, and also that I skipped some. So I would like to add that while we tried to touch on many topics and events and important decisions that have helped to form and expand this community over the last 150 years, we simply cannot include information on every topic. If we did, I'm assuming that after 4 or 5 hours of talking, we'd be the only ones in the room. And Karen might even feel obliged to turn off the cameras and go home herself. So bear with us. But we do want to make this interactive by posing questions throughout the text. And so be prepared to reasonably shout out your answers. And perhaps Nancy Nave or the Chamber will present a prize to the most knowledgeable Spencerian. Or maybe bragging rights.
Bring any prizes?
Or maybe private bragging rights are just good enough for tonight. So well, let's just start it off with a couple of easy ones. Who knows when the North Shopping Mall was constructed? Do, 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 do.
60s. Somewhere in the 60s.
59. And so we've got a couple other ones. So there's pre-mall. That's the feedlot and the farm that was up there in the wedge. Go ahead. And there it is constructed. And that's First Avenue over there on the right side, believe it or not. That doesn't go anywhere because there's North Lawn north of it. And there's a fun one on the inside. The rubber plants have not grown up yet. Remember when they touched the ceiling? Okay. Question 2, when was the South Park Mall built? Come on. How many?
30 years ago? 80.
Do the math. Tell me a date.
Who said 80? 82.
Who said 80?
I did.
She wins.
Yay!
Started in 79 and built through the winter in 1980. Okay, how about the first municipal swimming pool?
35.
That was here when I moved here in 65.
No, it was probably late 30s.
Yeah.
1940. That's kind of a trick question because the Lincoln's Boys Club had a swimming pool. But this was, I said municipal, so there you go. And who knows when the current aquatic center was constructed? Come on, we're getting really recent now. 96. Don't have a slide for that one because it's too new. Okay, here we go. Last one. True or false? Did some of the people of Spencer living south of the river ever announce a plan of secession in order to form a separate town named Harrisville? Bob gets it. True. In 1935, due to a lack of public improvements in their part of the community, a number of prominent Southsiders let it be known they were exploring an option to go it alone. A later article in the paper informed us that the matter was resolved sometime in 1938, 3 years after the principal parties involved worked things out at a local watering hole. Okay, we're gonna shift over and we're gonna let Jim talk about land.
Thank you, Kirby. On to the really fun stuff, right? So I'm Jim Thiesse. I'm a land surveyor. I think that's probably why I'm here. Kirby, while I got some credit for the program, Kirby did most all the work, and he's even told me what to say. So we'll start. So Iowa started out, and you kind of see it at the bottom here, part of the Iowa-Wisconsin territories. It was part of the Minnesota territory prior to that went all the way down to Missouri. So it was part of a larger territory. And then in 1838, Congress passed an act signed by President Martin Van Buren establishing the territory of Iowa and defined its borders. In 1846, Iowa became the 29th state and was admitted to the Union in 1847. But prior to that, there were 27 recognized counties already established within the state. Now we have 99, but when it became statehood, it came in with already 27 recognized counties. Then in 1849, they approved the Homestead Act, and the Homestead Act opened up settlement for 250,000 square miles of land west of the Mississippi River, including Iowa. That act allowed for all free men to claim up to 160 acres of federally owned land on the condition that the land was cultivated, a dwelling was constructed, and the claimant stayed on the land for at least 5 years. The Homestead Act was extended by Congress again in 1862. So now we get down to Clay County. Clay County was created by an act of the Iowa legislature then in 1854. So it became a state in 1847. The state legislature then created the counties. In 1854 was Clay County. So what they would have done is the land was still surveyed by the government land office. They issued specific rules, and they've changed over time. But in 1854, 1855, when Iowa was surveyed, they were using the rules of 1855, the 1855 surveyor's instructions, which we still look at and refer to today when we go back in land surveying. So they entered into a contract with a survey crew. Survey crews now we're down to a lot of times one guy and a lot of equipment. Back then it would have been a team. It would have included they would have included someone just to hunt and provide food for the team. So it could have been 20 or 30 guys on the survey crew, much different than today. So they entered into a contract with the government land office, and the first thing they would do was lay out the county in a 24 by 24 mile square. So the perimeter of Clay County is 24 miles on each side. Then they laid it out into townships. The 16 colored boxes you see, those are individual townships. The townships are 6 miles by 6 miles, creates 36 1-mile squares, which we refer to as a section. So each section is 640 acres. If you divide each section into quarters, which we commonly refer to as a quarter section, it's the 160 acres, and that's under the Homestead Act. That's the piece of ground you could get, 160 acres. So down around Royal, that would be, 3.2 million, something like that. So yeah, it was a good deal, that's what started everything. So one of the interesting things in Clay County when they came and laid out, so you would lay out the county border first, all the way around the box. And then they'd come in each township and go all the way around that. And the problem was with surveying, and it's still a little true today, once you got all the way back around, well, you wouldn't hit exactly where you started, and so they would have to correct. And so all the correction in a township is along the north side and the west side. You started in the southeast corner, worked your way around, and then they backtracked and corrected on the north side. So they laid out the townships, then they laid out the sections, marked the sections, if they could with a stone, but if you recall, it's easy to find the stones today. You drive down the gravel road and you dig a hole in the intersection and most likely there it is. But when these guys came through, you know, it was all prairie. It was all prairie, no roads, nothing to go by, and not a lot of stones laying on the surface of the ground. They weren't in a nice, neat pile in the corner of the field. They were buried under the prairie sod. So a lot of times they didn't have stones, so they marked them with a mound or a pit. They dug a hole. And that's why you say, well, how did they lose those corners? You know, why didn't they get preserved? Well, here's a prairie, here, find the hole. It's almost a needle in a haystack. So anyway, and then the other thing that's kind of interesting, in 1855, when the crew was up here surveying Clay County, they were attacked by Indians, Sioux Indians, and several of their crew members were killed. And in fact, they quit. And they went back down to Des Moines, and there are some letters in the original notes instructing them, subcontracting it then to another guy to come finish the survey. Someone maybe wasn't as afraid of Indians or had more guys with them. So anyway, that 1855, that was done. The tools they used, primarily a magnetic compass. So everything was done by magnetic declination. That's how they've got their directions. That or a solar theodolite. So if you roughly knew the time of day, the angle of the sun, you could tell position, similar to what sailors did with the sextant. That was another tool they used. They measured their distance with a chain. We refer to it now as a Gunter's chain. It was 66 foot long. So if you can imagine, you're measuring a mile, 5,280 feet with a 66-foot chain. So it's a lot of repetition. And so it's no wonder they never got back around to where they started. Again, and with, we think the bugs are bad. That's a problem. But here, you had the bugs, you had the terrain, you had Indians trying to kill you. So a lot of stuff going on. Chain was just a little surveying tidbit. A chain contains 4 sections. It's a rod, if you've heard of a rod. If there's any farm kids in here, when you lay out a fence, the fence posts are typically a rod apart, or you use that in measuring. Rod is 16 and a half feet. There's 80 chains in a mile. That's where the 66-foot chain kind of comes in. 80 rods, and all of a sudden you say, well, it's 80 rods. It works out to acres eventually. So a quarter of a mile, 33 feet wide, is 1 acre. And that's what typical road right-of-way is out in the country. Doesn't matter a lot here in town. City limits in Spencer encompasses either all or parts of 22 individual sections, so that's 22 square miles, bits and pieces around the fringe. We're in 4 different townships, which makes it kind of interesting for abstractors and realtors, because the descriptions are in 4 different townships instead of right in one. Which one is Summit, which one is Meadow, Sioux, and Riverton. Those are the 4 townships that we're in. We talked about the city being in there. We wanted to show the progression of the city. The city limits at different years and how it grew. Unfortunately, the records don't indicate when the city limits changed and how they changed, so we really can't provide that. But we thought that, we originally said, we'll show the city limits and the population, in 1890 and 1900, but we haven't been able to do that. I think we do have a couple older maps. Do we have is this the 1902? And it was blue because that's the way we made a blueprint back then. So that's street map, and it's
Approximate city limits, but
Yeah, there's not a hard line on there, is there?
Nope.
So that's 1902. I think we have is this the 39?
39. And again, you really can't tell if that's a city limits line. So all that stuff out west, the Randall Tuttle stuff, we don't know if that's actually in or out.
Sure, sure. And there was
The
a,
city limits were stopped at 18th Street, and it went down, we can't get the whole map on, but it ended about 8th Street, southeast and southwest, and then 10th Avenue, east. So you're kind of looking around at some of those, they have property lines and property ownership on this map, but not so much if it's a hard line that says this is the city limits.
yeah, and so that was 1939, but Spencer, the original plat of Spencer, so the original first town plat of Spencer was 1871, May 8th, 1871. The proprietor was J.H. Hale and his wife Maria. Subdivision, it was 12 separate blocks labeled A through L, and there it is. Grand Avenue, is it referred to as Main Street? On here, is the wide street between A and B and E and F. So that's the existing Grand, and it starts on the top would be Fourth Street today, and then runs down to, is it Park Street at the bottom?
Just, we don't get Park. Park's not part of.
Right, but present day Park Street would be L, K, and J. So it's that center, 12 square block area. Yeah, and then divided into lots. Most of the blocks had 16 lots. Some of them had 18 lots, so they were carved into smaller lots. So since 1871, there have been more than 300 subdivision plats accepted by the city of Spencer, and we want to go through each one of them individually. That'll clear the room. Yeah, it's all, but they kind of expand from there. When the railroad came in, the railroad subdivided, they did their own subdivisions. A lot of your small communities, a lot of those, the first subdivision in the community is the railroad plat. They platted the rail yard and then the town around it. They established the communities as they came through, mainly as someplace where they could get water, because they needed water for the steam locomotive. So that was important to them. Here, the town was already here, and the railroad comes a few years later. And I think, do we have more maps? Yep. So an 1871 map. That's not 1871. Oh, the blue square. Oh, okay. Now I'm with you. I haven't seen these, so this is my first time too. So that's 1871.
And that's superimposed on the current city limits map
okay.
on an aerial picture from the county. This is the kind of stuff that James does. So the little blue box is the original plat. So, eat the mic, that's right.
And the population.
Oh, yeah. So the population in 1880 was 824 people. Good, Jim.
Okay. So this is 1872 to 1900. So in that 28 years, you can see how much we grew. And in 1900, the population was 3,095. Then this is 1901 to 1925, a little bit slower growth. In 1910, the population was 3,005, so we actually lost 95. And in 1920, it was just under 4,600. Then we go on to 1926 to 1950. Population 1930, 5,019. 1940, 6,599. 1950, 7,446. Now we jump from 1951 to 1975. 1960, the population was 8,864. 1970, it climbed to 10,278. Then we jump and add from 1976 to 2000. 1980, the population was 11,729. In 1990, it was 11,210. And the year 2000, it was 11,358. And so does this bring us up to the present, 2001 to the present? And the 2010 population was 11,233. So the area of subdivisions continues to grow. The population is kind of hanging in there.
And so the other things you can see about this are the undeveloped areas of the city haven't been platted because they don't need to be, and other areas that have not been platted, the little gaps and such and such here and there that are developed that aren't platted because they didn't have to do the platting process at the time. So the progression, of course, we start here in the middle with the original plat, and if you can remember how the progression was, we started at the middle and just kept working our way out and working our way out. And generally, engineers will tell you this, growth follows the end of the pipe. So for the most part, so you don't jump, you don't leapfrog all the way out and then fill in between. You start at the source and you keep extending stuff out and out. So in certain areas like down in here, you're going to see really old homes, the 1900s or just prior to the 1900s, usually single story, maybe a story and a half or a two-story every once in a while. Generally, the older homes have very few steps. They're kind of set down low on the ground. So when you're kind of looking around. So years and years ago, when we first started historical preservation, I went around the town with Bernie Kenninger, who retired architect, and we tried to find significant buildings and homes in the community. And so it was like Architecture 101 in the car. And so we were taking pictures, and he would describe what you're looking at when you're looking at an older home. And so he says the few steps is a sign of an older home. The brackets on the eaves are generally, I mean, if they're ornate brackets, it's usually pre-1900. Most of those simple homes didn't have basements, but as time went on and they had money, sometimes in the winter they would have a contractor come in and they would dig a cellar underneath. So if you're in an older home and this foundation comes in about 3 feet from the edge and then goes down and there's a cellar and there's like a ledge back there made out of concrete, it never had a basement to start with, but they do now. And so you start seeing newer architecture and newer homes as you keep going out and out and out. You know, these, like up in this area, you're looking at a different type of lot configuration. You know, we started out with 44-foot lots or narrower, and usually about 122 feet deep. Then the railroad subdivisions came, and they were 50-foot lots, and they're
24.
No, they were
100, well, if the 300-foot blocks,
so
take out a 16-foot alley.
140,
So
100, what the heck? 144?
Yep,
288,
I didn't know there'd be a quiz.
288.
No,
142 deep.
142, yeah, I take
They're 50
away-
by 142. On all these areas around here with these subdivisions, a 50-foot lot was really popular a long time. But then we start getting newer and newer. They get wider and wider. The area up in here was kind of developed for ranch homes, which is a new configuration. So you've got a really wide lot and not very deep. And so they wanted width because now we have an attached garage where we didn't have them before. You tucked the garage behind before. And then of course you get into the really newer areas, and now we're like 90, 95-foot lots, sometimes a 100-foot lot on a corner, or even bigger on a corner. So we keep eating up more land with our houses, and they keep getting bigger. Down in here, again, in the 50s and 60s, when that was developed, north of the mall. So you're looking at a lot of ranch homes down there, single stories. Is that about it for architecture and development for residential?
Yep, I think you're to the Sanborn map.
Yeah. This is where the wheels are going to fall off after this picture, because this is a fun picture that we found. This is taken from, you can read the text, it's taken from the roof of the Lincoln School, and that is where they're going to build the courthouse in 1900. And so that is the old courthouse. That is the Catholic Church. It's not the masonry one on that corner. It's the wooden one on this corner. And that is called, oh, no, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? No, there's a name. That. I looked that up. That is, yeah, it's like a rectory, except it's used in terms of Episcopal Church. I'm going, I don't think so. So look that up, MANSE. Cool stuff. So then you can also see, according to the photograph, and this is really shady, there's the Erling. There's the smokestack for the power plant. There's the mill that burned down in 1920. Somewhere in here that they say there's the steeple for the Baptist Church, which is right where we're at today, right now. That's the same corner, the Northwest Federal corner, or the City Hall corner now. So, and there's the water tower for the railroad, and I think this line represents the depot. So there's how the courthouse looked before, and supposedly somewhere they say there's a jail. Now, the last time I saw a Sanborn map, there's a jail right here. So I'm not sure if they're saying that's the jail, which they always had in the newspaper saying, we need to condemn this thing and build a new one because it's really in bad shape and people can escape whenever they want to. So here's a 1939 aerial picture showing the development of the town. Now we're going to see this a lot because there's a lot of phases about this picture that we're going to look at. So the original picture is in City Hall. A guy gave it to us. And this is the digital image, so it's grainy, but the aerial picture is just wonderful. And you can take a magnifying glass and you can see roofs. So you can see in 1939 what's been developed and what's empty. So you can, a lot of vacant lots here and there, a lot of vacant lots over here. Here's Milwaukee, here's 18th Street, here's 10th Avenue East. A lot of vacant lots.
Up above your hand on the left, is that the fairgrounds?
Yep, there's the racetrack. There is the parking lot. And there's all the buildings. We got some pictures later for that. If we don't run out of time. There's the airport. There's the railroad tracks coming in. That's the M and St. L. Anyway, we'll come back to that several times during. This is a photograph from the top of the elevator looking to the west. This is the Howe edition for the most part. So we're looking at post-World War II, not bungalows, post-World War II, I can't remember the phrase they call it. But so no trees, and they're all new. And that's a gravel road. 7th Street is the gravel road going that way. And if you look way in the background, in the photograph it's better, way in the background you can see Riverside Cemetery. That house is still there. There's a duplex on that corner now, and all these are still here. No trees. You're looking to the southwest. So there's 7th Street. You're on the top of the elevator looking, you'd be looking straight west that way. So you're kind of looking, so somewhere over here is 4th Street that you probably can't see because of the trees.
There was a farmhouse at the end of that, right next to the cemetery.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out, that's a big roof. So that's got to be a big ranch house somewhere, but I haven't figured it out. So this must be 5th Street going this way.
And the streets aren't paved yet, are they?
Nope, it's dirt, gravel. Okay.
Kirby, I just wanted to say something
Yeah.
about, when talking about plating and the development of housing, I just have to say this, is that the Milwaukee Railroad Edition went up to 11th, and now we call it Grand.
Yep.
It was Main Street. And then from 11th, I think all the way down to 18, Griffin, correct me if I'm wrong, was the Higgins.
Griffin and Adams.
Griffin Adams Edition.
Yep.
And that had a caveat in that plating that they had to have a 75-foot setback. And so that's what makes Grand, I think, look so grand. If you think about when you're driving, once you get past 11th and Grand, that's a 35-foot setback. And then you move to those 75 feet, and it changes the whole
Dramatic.
character of that street.
Dramatic.
Which I
Yep.
think is such an interesting, and I think
Yep, they added an amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Right,
Yep,
which wasn't too long ago, which
Yep.
is pretty interesting.
yep. Go for it. Okay, this is this is the rabbit hole. This is the Sanborn maps, and I just love these things. And if you ever get a chance to go online and look them up, there's all sorts of different communities, but even just the Spencer ones, they're just hilarious. I mean, they've got so much stuff. So a long time ago, the Sanborn Map Company would go out and they would draw towns so that insurance people could calculate risk for fire insurance. And so these things have got so many things about them. This is the index, the key about what you got. Now, the reason I did this one is the city actually has a 1941, and it's on the table here. And you can look at it later. And it's in color. And so the color represents the type of construction. Now, the state has microfilmed all the rest of them, but they're in black and white. Now, I've been to the State Library or the Historical Society in Des Moines and looked at some of the years are in Des Moines. The rest are at the University of Iowa Library in Iowa City. And so you can go get the book. I worked for the city then, and they let me have it. And I could look at them. I'm not sure if everyone can just walk in and look at them, because they're a great big book. They're like 30 inches square and individual pages, and they just have a wealth of information. So so here's the example of 1941 at 4th and Grand. Here's Grand, there's 4th, there's the Farmers Bank, there's the McAllister Block. And so in 41, you've got pink is masonry, that's stone, and it's actually, technically, it's cast concrete walls. Yellow is wood frame, concrete block. So the reason I picked this one, and then I believe, yeah, the blue is concrete block, and that's concrete block, yep. So look at it, you got auto body shop. It tells you what is in it, the dimensions, the heights, what's in it, furniture storage. There's the furniture again, store, bank, restaurant. And sometimes they'll even have, here's a partition, load-bearing wall with a stair going up for the Union Block. And so if you ever get a chance to look at these things, they're just, you can lose hours and hours, and hopefully not tonight. So we have Sanborn maps for Spencer from 1893, 1900, 1909, 1915, 1924, and 1941. And so I chose a couple of pages from a lot of these, so we can have a fun time kind of gliding around and looking at how things were done. And they even have water mains on the streets. So here's a 4-inch water main, here's a 6-inch water main, 6s going up either side of Grand. So it was all about trying to figure out this fire risk thing. And the fun part was I had to go online and find a code, because some of these things were really kind of fun, and to figure out what they abbreviated the use for. Okay. Let's just go let's just do right in order. We'll just do them all. So here's 1893. It's a sideways now. Main Street's going this way, 2nd Street, 3rd, 4th, 5th. We're going to get, a little bit later, we're going to figure out in 1939 they renumbered all the streets. And so 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th were the only streets that stayed the same. Everything else got changed. So Mill is 1st Avenue, and West is 1st Avenue West. And so just 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and 5th were the only streets that stayed the same. So it's blurry, and we can zoom in a little bit, hopefully. And we'll kind of go down the line. So 2nd and Grand, there's a Clifford Hotel, vacant building, Spencer Hotel, bakery, grocery, millinery, storage, millinery, meat market, grocery, BNS. This is the fun one.
We came up with other things that
we overthought this so bad. That's why I had to get that index. I asked Sharifa last week, I said, what does BNS mean? She goes, I don't know. And she tried to Google it on her phone and she couldn't get it. So I got on the internet. Any guesses? BNS?
Beer and snacks.
We'll get into that later. Boots and shoes. I had to email her at the middle of the night going, I figured it out, what it is. Now you can sleep. So here we are. So there's 4th and Grand. So the Farmers Bank's not there yet. It's 2 wood frame buildings.
So is it the 1893?
1893.
Okay.
Yep. So up in the corner, photos 1893. That's the second page of the 1893. There's only 3 pages in 1893. So they got the important stuff. They drew what they could because everything else was so spread out they didn't care.
Who is they?
The Sanborn Map Company.
Who is the Sanborn Map?
The people that made the map. It was a company in.
I mean, it's sort of incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, they're everywhere. They are from New York. Sanborn Map Company. I don't have it just says New York. It doesn't have a date. It doesn't have a town.
Do you know if they did these maps in other states, I assume, too?
Yeah, everywhere. They're everywhere. Yeah,
It's so incredible.
yeah. They are. And like I said, you go ahead and zoom in on one page and just kind of peer around and look. And hours later, you're still there. So.
They go further north than.
Yeah. Yep. So this is just one page of 1893 because I figured if I showed you all of them, because as they get newer, there's more pages, and I think the biggest one is 24, and there's 13 pages. This is 41, and it's
That's 93. 41 is.
there's 13 pages in 41. So it'd take forever. But I just wanted to give you a representation of what's going on here with these things. So here is the big tall bank that burned in 1931. There's the photo gallery on the second floor, which at this time I think was Medlar, I think. So billiards, and then agricultural implements is at 5th, where the drugstore was. Now it's the Bailey Law Firm. Again, lumber sheds. And look at this, 1893, 4th, and the rest of the block is empty. There's nothing there. So you have the Nicodemus block, and then that's it. Okay, let's do the next one.
You're gonna run out of time.
Well, what?
You're gonna totally run out of time.
I'm going to totally run out of time. You're right.
You need to probably not do the rest of this.
I don't know about the rest of them. I think we got that much. We can get through this, can't we? Maybe not. Let's see, which one's be a fun one? I got a Clay County Fair there, and I got a Clay County Fair there. This one is fun, 1909. We'll do it really quick. The Straight Brothers Brick Company factory in the northeast corner of town. So where Jim and Tammy Higgins lives on 18th and just east of 10th Avenue, if you follow the railroad tracks to the northeast, there's a hole back up in there. And maybe on one of these 39 aerials, we'll see the hole. That's where the bricks, that was their clay pit. That was a going concern. That was our first economic development project with the city council. They funded the Straight Brothers from Paw Paw, Illinois. They came in, they said, if you hire so many people, and what I think it was just hire so many people, we'll front you the money. So after about 3 or 4 years, they more than exceeded how many people they hired, and they wanted to sell it to somebody else. And one of the city fathers said, well, they're backing out of the deal. We need to get our money back. And it's like, everyone else said, no. We're better off now. So yeah, look at all the kilns that they had. And again, machinery room, all this stuff they wrote down. But there's all the kilns. Yeah, you're right. We better keep going. The sun's going to go down. So there's another brick company. I have another one that was way up at the northwest. So there was a brick company. Nah, I better not do that. There was another one that was behind Pixel Electric, but on the west side of 4th Avenue, of the gravel road, behind Pixel Electric, there is, you're really going to, I'm going to push me away. Okay. I tell you what, we could always go back if we had run out of time. Or okay, let's go back because the Sanborn maps are gold. But she's right. We're going to run out of time. Why, I don't know, Sharifa. Where could you? From the state library? You gave them to me as an email, so I don't know how to get at them.
So you can have a library collection like I do, and you can just apply for.
You need to say that so people can hear.
Sanborn fire insurance maps are available through the State Library of Iowa. You just apply to get a state library card. You can download them electronically. I just Googled really quickly the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company. They did over 12,000 communities or cities throughout the United States. And so I'm sure other state libraries have them as well. But you can go to the Iowa State Library, search by county, and then by city, and download them as a PDF.
There. They're golden. I mean, if you've got a long winter night, I totally recommend doing it.
Kirby, on the map that she showed just
Huh?
before she moved to this one, the townships,
Uh-huh. The colored one?
yeah,
Yeah? That's from the 1919,
I know, but.
okay.
I want you to point out Spencer on the,
Oh, on the county? Ooh.
just before, it was the very first thing you showed us in this whole presentation.
Way back here.
Oh, missed it.
Oh, that's all right.
No, it's coming, it's coming. There's Spencer. So there's Meadow, Summit, Riverton, Sioux. And so they all meet. 4th Avenue West is the line between the two townships, and 30th Street, which is the old Shopper Supply Corner. Everything north of there is Meadow and Summit. That's where the dividing line is.
And its location speaks to the controversy over moving the county seat.
Absolutely, yep.
You
You
wanna
know,
talk about
yeah, well, we're gonna go, another rabbit hole. So there's Peterson, that's the first county seat, and lo and behold, soon after, well, there's a Wikipedia story that says that at some point, a judge in Woodbury County says it should be in Spencer Grove. Well, there's no one in Spencer Grove. So it ended up in Peterson, and then we started growing more, and we had more votes, and we outvoted Peterson, and it went to the central part of the county, which it really isn't until you go there. So
So do you think that, somebody told me that's a business person downtown, that Spencer is 66% of the county?
population,
Yeah.
I'd say that's pretty close, because
I'm
we're
trying to
bulk.
figure out COVID when all that was
Oh.
going on.
Not having the most current, and I'll just do round numbers. It used to be that we were like 11,000, ballpark 11,000, and the county was 17 something total population. So yeah. Sanborn maps. Oh yeah, comprehensive renumbering of the city. So
Seen you so excited before, Kirby.
no, I think she wants to go home. So in 1939, we renumbered the street, and we had talked about it in the newspapers for almost 20 years of arguing and haranguing about it because the post office had a real problem with us. So in 39, there's the 39 map, and it was made because of the renumbering. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. So First Avenue West. No, well, no, that's the, no, we're still doing the renumbering. Okay, we'll just do this one. This is the 39 map. So Main Street went to Grand. First, second, third, fourth, fifth stayed the same. But First Avenue West was called West. It didn't have a street or an avenue, just West. Second Avenue West was State. Third Avenue West was Water. Fourth Avenue West was Grove. Sixth Avenue West was Huff. Seventh Avenue West was Sioux, and Sioux was only 1 block long back then, and it didn't even make this map. It's right there. There's Sioux. That's it. And Pine became 6th Street. So now remember, on the map before this, 18th Street was 16th Street in 1902. So everything had to jump up 2 streets because they added 6th instead of Pine, and now we had West North Railway, West South Railway, East North Railway, and South East Railway. So they got rid of those and just called it Railway, North Railway, and then they had to renumber everything two streets up. So when you see an old plat, they're all off by 2 streets. On the east side, we have First Avenue East was Mill, Second Avenue was Prairie, Third Avenue was Miller, Fourth Avenue was Bender, Fifth Avenue was Adams. This is fun. On Sixth Avenue, south of the tracks, it was Cornell, and north of the tracks, it was Hughes. Seventh Avenue, the south of the tracks was Grand Avenue, and north was College. Eighth Avenue was blank. It was blank on the map. And Stebbings was on the north side. And Ninth Avenue was Park Avenue on the north side, and it was blank on the south. And 10th Avenue East was East Avenue. And on the south, it was Center Street was South Grand. And it actually has to be offset because it wasn't even lined up prior to this. West Street was First Avenue Southwest. Gravel Street was 4th Street Southeast and Southwest. First Avenue Southeast was High Street. Second Avenue Southeast was East Street. So you got an east on 10th Avenue and an East Street. Yeah, I think it's confusing. 5th Street Southeast Southwest was 2nd Street. 7th Street Southeast Southwest was 1st Street. And 8th Street Southeast Southwest was South Street.
And the post office didn't like that?
Good thing we didn't have pizza delivery back then. Yep. Now we're going to go into the transportation part of this. So we're going to start out. So originally we had stagecoach routes in the county. That's all we had for roads because we really didn't have a comprehensive road system. So basically you're looking at probably paths from previous travelers or their cattle or their wagons making marks in the tall grass. And so we didn't have the road system that we had. So that was the first way to get to Spencer, was by a path or by stagecoach. So I didn't even ask you for an answer on that 39 remodeling or the renumbering. So what? Yeah, I know I told him. What year did the railroad come to Spencer? Oh, they're all they've already fallen asleep.
1870s.
8. Everything changed in 1878 when it was confirmed that the railroad was coming through Spencer. The weekly newspaper was filled with stories about the progress of the railroad as it neared the community. Local people traveled east to meet up with and observe the track laying crews, and excitement grew daily as they grew closer. Additional crews from the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company were also grading the railbed and building bridges ahead of the track laying crews. Local people hired on with the work crews, providing an economic boost to the community. A site for the depot was selected. The railroad representatives shared details concerning right-of-way purchase or condemnation. And the upshot of all this effort and expense was that the consumer goods purchased from vendors outside of Spencer would be reduced because the train would have lower transportation fees than those charged by people delivering goods by horse and wagon. Outgoing livestock and other agricultural products would be worth more for the same reason. The telegraph lines arrived in Spencer within a week of the rails being laid in town, and the world just got smaller. All of this modern technology was only a half a mile north of town. The first train puffed into Spencer on September 15th, 1878, with a brass band in attendance. 11 days later, the newspaper noted that a load of coal arrived, and it sold like hotcakes. This railroad line has been in continuous operation since 1878. However, there have been several number of railroad companies that have taken over the operation of the rail. And we can't nail down exactly when the last passenger service was discontinued in Spencer, but it seems to me that it's sometime in the early to mid 1960s. I was a little kid. My mom and dad said, you've got to get on a car, on a railroad. So they put us on the train, sent us to Mason City to visit my grandmother. I was a little kid, so yeah, that's a long time ago. So now we're going to go to the M and St. L. The second railway company to enter Spencer was in Minneapolis and St. Louis. Around 1900-1901, the railway entered Spencer from the south as part of a route from Storm Lake to Minneapolis. A depot was constructed just south of East 4th Street, and soon after a turntable was built just south of East Park Street. This railroad was apparently not as successful as the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul, and the M and St. L filed to abandon the track in 1936. So again, there's a 1919 copy of the railroad lines in Iowa and how they went through Clay County. and served Spencer. And an aerial picture. Again, I wanted to show you this because a lot of people don't remember this part of the railroad. Right through the south part of town. So here's South Grand, there's the South T, came up through the golf course, cut the corner and went up through here, went over Highway 18. There was a bridge or a trestle over here, went up this grade, which is why 4th Avenue Southeast is a 100-foot right-of-way because it's an old railroad right-of-way. That's why 4th Avenue Southeast is so wide. Crossed the bridge right there, ended up in somewhere right in here. We're going to see on an older map the turntable, and then there's the depot at 4th, which is right there. And then it went off towards Terrell, or Langdon, sorry.
I rode that train to Esterville. As a little kid.
My dad,
From Esterville to Terrell, it's a required first grade field trip.
Want to go to the big city, leave Esterville, and go to Terrell.
there you go. Well, and this map shows a really good, look at all the railroad, the spur lines and everything. Now, my dad, when he was a younger person, he would get on this and go up to Fostoria on this line, and he called that the interurban or the galloping goose. And it was a gasoline-powered, like 2 cars, I think, an engine and another car together. And yeah, so even this old map, you know, North School, I think that's the hospital. It's a fun map. So, but look at all the rail lines. Look at all the stuff. Look at all the rail lines downtown. All the spurs going here and there. Yeah. Let's see. Next page. Yeah, we're going to run out of time. So there's the Emmons St. L Bridge over the Little Sioux, and you can still see one pier in East Leach Park next to the river. There's a limestone cut stone pier. That's the south pier for that bridge. So we're going to run now. So now we're to the main street of the Grand Avenue Bridge. When was the first bridge built across the Little Sioux River in Spencer? Shout it out. 1875. Close enough. Wooden structure built in 1875. The bridge was replaced in 1884 with a steel truss bridge, as the first wooden bridge suffered greatly from the high water flows and ice. In 1901, a second steel truss bridge was installed south of the 1889 bridge and was connected by way of a series of timber pile spans. This assembled bridge system proved problematic as the river shifted its course between the two structures. In 1914, the State Highway Commission was asked to assist the Clay County Board of Supervisors in an improved design. The state came up with a 422-foot-long 5-span earthen-filled concrete structure, and in 1915, the county contracted with a Thor Construction Company of Cedar Rapids at a bid price of $30,121. To enable the construction of the 1915 concrete bridge, the 2 existing steel press bridges were moved to new locations west of Spencer by the County Board of Supervisors. According to the 1971 Centennial Book, the 1889 truss bridge was moved to west of Spencer and is now known as Thunder Bridge. The 1901 bridge was also moved to northwest Spencer and crosses the Little Sioux River on 18th Avenue or 210th Avenue in the county, or the Tree Disposal Site Road. This particular bridge is listed on the National Register of Historic Places for its significance as a Pennsylvania truss design. In 1944, the Grand Avenue Bridge was widened to accommodate 4 lanes of vehicular traffic, and its earthen fill was replaced. Pedestrian sidewalks on either side of the traffic lanes were also constructed at this time. In 2006, a new 449-foot-long Grand Avenue Bridge was constructed by the state after it was determined that repairing the 1915-1944 bridge was no longer feasible, and this bridge was completed in 2007. As long as we're discussing the Grand Avenue Bridge, when did the city straighten the river in Spencer? 55. See, Bob's ahead. He's got to be ahead. Tom's ahead. Yep, so here's a before and after. 1930 aerial that James gave us from the county, and the present. So it really wiggled a lot west of the bridge. And of course, it was really, really close to the swimming pool on the east side. That dip almost touched the backside of the swimming pool that we used to have. What was the year that was the highest flood level recorded in Spencer? 53, June 8th. I can't guarantee that's a picture of the 53 flood, but it's got to be a good representation of what we had.
Kirby, I think a lot of us will remember the cattle that stacked up against the
I'm not that old.
no life change.
All right, now we're down to county roads and highways, and oh my gosh, 5 minutes. We're going to be cut off. Do we want to cut some stuff? Highway stuff, public works stuff? Another week?
You answer one question, this
Yeah.
goes way back before everything you're talking about, but I still haven't caught where Spencer Grove and Spencer became. So where was Spencer Grove?
The rumor has it that it was about this location, and yep, well, yeah, well, so 2 weeks ago, Steve Baumgars did his thing about George Spencer, and he put his name on a tract of land, I think just east of Spencer, on top of the bluff. Yep. And so he posed the thing saying Spencer. Then, according to Wikipedia, then someone later said, let's call it Spencer Grove. And I think that's what Steve mentioned too, that it was called Spencer Grove for a while to entice people to maybe come here. And then at some point, we wanted to become Spencer Grove, and the post office said there's already a Spencer Grove, so you have to change it. So they dropped the Grove. So,
Okay, so Spencer was incorporated in what year?
incorporated in 1881. So the first plat's 71. So, yeah, we're going to run out of time. So anyway, so you want to hear about highways, Main Street paving? We got public works, we got sewage treatment plants to go through, and airport to go through. We could talk about pictures and try to wrap it up, or else, is it legal to go over, Sharifa? It's legal to go over a little bit? Okay. Karen says it's okay, so you guys are trapped. So, thanks, Bob. Starting in the early 1900s, there are numerous news articles and minutes from the supervisors, County Board of Supervisors, about grading and section line roads in the county to get up out of the mud. And in 1919, the 38th General Assembly of the State Legislature established a primary road system, a primary road fund, and a plan to improve the entire state road system. And voters in each county were to vote if they wished to collect taxes for the improvement of those roads, and Clay County passed it. So they were allowed to include highways 10, 18, and 71 in Clay County into the comprehensive improvement plan. And this is why we have the 1919 primary road map. That's the oldest primary road map in Iowa, and that also came from that atlas, that 1919 atlas. When did the United States establish the current comprehensive numbering system for the federal highway system? 1925. In 1922, the Clay County Board of Supervisors reported that 101 of the 110 miles of county roads had been paved at a cost of $140,000, and in the language of their day, paving meant gravel. Stories found in the Reporter and the News Herald in 1923 reported that in local efforts to designate Highway 18 as the Atlantic, Yellowstone, and Pacific Highway, or the AYP, similar to the Lincoln Highway across central Iowa. Power poles were marked with a band of white paint on each half mile and at turns as an aid to drivers. And then similarly, the newspapers also reported that the city of Spencer had paved 40 to 50 blocks of streets in 1925. In 1930, a bond issue was passed in Clay County allowing for the Portland cement paving of highways 10, 18, and 71 in the county. And they were basically completed in the Spencer vicinity in 1933. 1932 is when Spencer received a concrete paving, which replaced the original asphalt surface installed in 1921. I do have some interesting stories about some lawsuits and stuff about that, but I think we're going to run out of time. So at one time, briefly, the Highway 18 was going to go across 4th Street. And after the bond issue was passed, the state decided to put it where it is now, a mile south, down in the South T. Well, lawsuits were filed by people in Spencer saying, well, if you change the route, we voted on the route and the funding. So if you change the route, then you can't use their money. You have to find some of their funding source for the new route. It was finally resolved and it was put in, but it delayed it for about a year on that stretch. When did Spencer get its first automated traffic signal? Dave, you got to know this one. 1936, 4th and Main. Prior to that, it was a four-way flashing light. Now we're going to jump to the airport. The first airport was located south of 11th Street Southwest and roughly between 1st Avenue Southeast and 4th Avenue Southwest. It was constructed by the city in 1934 and managed by the city, by the Junior Chamber of Commerce. Consisted of a series of grass runways and newspaper stories told of the ever-increasing air traffic in the area. And in 1935, they applied for and received funds from the state to put up a beacon and lights, which made Spencer one of only 6 airports in Iowa that had that equipment. Later, as traffic increased, Sid Cleveland, who was hired as an airport manager, and he held the position for several years before resigning to accept a position at a larger airport. After that, a few years later, it was determined that that the space was inadequate and we needed more room because larger planes, larger runways, etc. So in 1940, the city started to acquire land northwest of town through a grant with the WPA and the Army Civil Aeronautical Authority in the amount of $803,000. The city's share was $30,000, which was obtained through the sale of the old airport property. The next time the original airport was mentioned in the newspaper was in 1945 for Hart Field, a private airfield owned by John Hart. After that, there was an article in 1948 paper describing the Hart baseball field, and it's really unknown exactly when the airport's use ceased. So the current airport has got, started out in 1940, had turf runways. In 1956, the original 2,700 foot long 1230 runway was graded and paved with 2 inches of asphalt. And over the past 50 years, through grants through the FAA, we've now got a 6,000 foot long by 100 foot wide precision runway at 1230 and a 5,100 foot long, 75 foot wide 1836 runway with paved parallel taxiways and tie downs and terminal buildings and conventional hangars and T hangars and whatnot. It's also located on 925 acres of land is what the city owns about the airport, plus avigation rights over another 87 lands. I love that word, avigation. You don't use that very often. Yep, so now we're going to jump to Public Works. That's why Mark White's here in the back. So if you're to spend your whole time reading old newspapers, you're going to find out that Public Works is never done. It's constantly being extended, enlarged, replaced, improved all the time. And if you were to read a newspaper in 1921, and you're going to see notices for bidders in the same extremely fine print as you do today about things about street paving, public buildings, structures, equipment, you name it, water mains, sewers. So we're going to look at stuff in terms of 150 years of improvement, and we probably need to shorten this up. So, yep. So, so when did we build our first wastewater treatment plant? Otherwise known as a sewage treatment plant for some. 1935. We hired an engineering firm to conduct a survey, applied through a grant with the PWA, another one of those alphabet things from the Depression, and to build a wastewater facility and an interceptor sewer. The grant was approved. In 1937, bonds were sold for the city's share, and before the end of the year, it was constructed and online. And get this, it was built by the Thor Construction Company of Cedar Rapids, just like the Grand Avenue Bridge. Excuse me? Cedar Falls, sorry. So let's just think about that. So in 1937, we got a wastewater treatment plant. So prior to that, Spencer didn't treat 1 ounce of wastewater. It went right to the river, right to the river. A population of 6,000 people into the river. Yeah. Yeah, which might explain why Lucy Jones, who owns land on the south side of town, filed suit against the city for $10,000 in damages in 1928 for allowing sewage to accumulate on her property. At the time, the city council was contemplated buying her land, and they didn't get it done, and about 3 or 4 years later, they were still talking about it. But now it is part of East Leach Park. So years later, we built a new wastewater treatment plant in 1975 is the new one. So here's a plat of 1941 sewer plat showing all where all the mains are going. And if you'll notice, you're going to see pipes going right to the river. Pipe, 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 pipe. Well, I guess not. No, this is 41, so it's before that. So these actually are connected. These actually are going to, it is the interceptor going to the plant. And there's the plant down there. Right where the street department is now is the old wastewater plant. So now we can talk about SMU. So, yep. So the city water department was formed in 1886 at the request of the citizens, and the first well and water tank were located on South Main near the river. And any part of Grand or Main Street south of 4th Street was considered South Main. So I know that Marine wanted to see where the water tank was that burned down. And in the 1893 Sanborn map, the lots are vacant. So obviously it happened before, it burned down before they made the map.
It's in the Centennial book, and it sounds like it's the quarter where the bank is now. Used to talk, I could not, which
I think the Sanborn map, I think it's first. I think it's the fire station. Water tank caught fire in 1893 and was destroyed along with its equipment. In 1894, several members of the community formed a stock company for the purpose of producing electricity for sale to the general public and for street illumination. They closed the power plant just north of the railroad tracks and on the east side of Maine. The water tank after the fire was moved to that same site and rebuilt, and a new well was dug, and it was said that there's abundant water was found there. In 1897, the electrical company ran into some cash flow issues, and the property was sold at sheriff's sale to the First National Bank. And in 1901, the city purchased the property from the bank and took over the operation of the electrical utility. And in the beginning, the city council oversaw the daily operation of both water and electrical until election in 1942, when the voters decided to establish a board of trustees. And the first trustees were Randall Tuttle, E.P. Arnold, and Dale Norton. So there's a photo of the old generator. So they constantly upgraded this. You're going to constantly see ads in the paper about, I need a bigger generator, I need a new, bigger dynamo. And then finally in 1912, they switched from engines to a steam system and boiler. And then when did the city install the steam lines in tunnels on either side of Main Street that would provide steam heat to the downtown buildings? 1933. And it's a fun story, and I'll take some time because we're still running way late. In between 1895 and 1900, there's a story that said, I got the quote, that Spencer should now be considered a fully modern and metropolitan community of the first order because electricity was to be available 24 hours a day. And another fun fact was the story about a modern street lighting around 1900 through the installation of 6 carbon arc lights on poles set up around the town, as it felt that gas lighting was antiquated. And then we lost, so they had enough generating capacity that they actually, when rural electrification came in 1927, they cut off power. The city was supplying power to various areas in the county. And in 27, it was noted that IPS cut them off at the Harmony area, which I think is the Gillette Grove Webb area. Anyway, we're down to the wells. So we had wells around the power plant, and then we bought well farm on the east side of town, and then we jumped across 10th Avenue, and we bought a piece of land from the Olson sisters that are now comprise the ball diamonds on the east side. And then they had wells and a water treatment plant there. Yep. So let's go. We're running over. So I've got, how about we just do a bunch of pictures now?
Okay.
We'll just be done.
Okay.
So who knows what that is? It's East School that burned down in 1926. And before the 1926 was over, Reynolds School is built on that property. There's the original, well, that's the second high school, the one at East 4th Street. 1912, it was under construction, occupied in 1914. There's the field house. 1952. 1952. There's West School. That is the original high school for Spencer, and it burned in 1912, reconstructed, and named Lincoln. So that's the site of the old, or the current Clay County Administration Building. There's the original Fairview with the park pavilion on the front. That's when I went to school there. It was just one little stretch from kindergarten to third. And there's the hospital, the original 1939, 35 hospital. So briefly, in 1909, a number of women in the community determined it was time to provide a higher level of medical services that was then available. They formed a hospital association. First formal community hospital was established in 1911 and located at 107 West 3rd, occupied a 2-story wood frame structure, formerly used as a church. And then they moved in 35, they celebrated the new opening of a 3-story on First Avenue between 11th and 12th. 26 beds, had all the latest and most modern equipment available. And in 37, the hospital associated donated the property to the city, and they established the hospital board. Riverside Cemetery was platted in 1878. However, it did not get its name until 1897 when the Ladies Cemetery Association named it so. Getting a trend here? Ladies are active. The mausoleum at the cemetery was constructed by a private firm from Chicago in 1918, and in 1956 the building was deeded over to the city for the sum of $1. The statue of the soldier on top of the tall monument was erected in 1915 in honor of all the soldiers and sailors who fought in the wars of our country. North Lawn Cemetery Memorial Park was founded in 1937 by Mr. and Mrs. C.J. Hector. It was later sold to R.C. Brown, who owned it for at least 27 years. And at some point, Warner Funeral Homes purchased the property, and in 1995, it was given to the city to operate. So we just have a few more. Like, when was the depot demolished? 1983. When was Oneota Cabin built, and for whom, and by whom? And that was 1934, and it was built by the CCC, and it was for the Boy Scouts. Leach Field was constructed in 1926 for $3,400, and that was right at the corner of 4th and South Grand, and West Leach Park, just snuggled right up against that the intersection there. And then we just have some old photos of the fairgrounds, because we couldn't just not talk about the fairgrounds at all. And we ran out of time with the Sanborn map. So here's a 1913 of the fair. I love this one. This is a great picture. That front gate's almost got to be new. Wood spoke wheeled cars in the foreground. The grandstands in 31. And I think that picture is from 32. So there's the, yep, and there's more parking up, and there's an aerial. We don't have a date on the aerial. But remember when the carnival was, and the Midway was crossing 4th Avenue West. And there's the courthouse in 1902. And that's the end, and I apologize for going over. And there's so many, what?
It's TC's fault.
Yeah, it's Jim's fault. So, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Kirby and Jim, for doing the presentation tonight, and thank you all for attending. For more information on Flag Fest and the 150th celebration, please pick up a booklet on your way out. Thank you.